The universe had always been a place of order, a vast expanse where every civilization understood its limits and the consequences of defying them. Across countless galaxies, there were rules, unspoken, absolute, and among the most sacred of these was a single warning whispered in every council, echoed in every starship log: never provoke humanity. It was a warning that most dismissed as exaggeration, a relic from legends too old to matter. Yet, those who knew that humans were not to be trifled with. The title of this story, "The Universe Warned Them About Humans. They Didn't Listen," is not merely a statement. It is a confession of hubris and the beginning of a catastrophic chain of events. In the far reaches of the Vilorian cluster, a species known as the Kreliths prided themselves on their intelligence, their mastery of technology, and their dominion over several star systems. They had studied humanity from afar, dismissing the humans as primitive, fragile, and inconsequential. Reports of human resilience were catalogued, analyzed, and then filed away as anomalies, minor aberrations that did not merit real concern. The council chambers of the Vilorian cluster buzzed with excitement as they planned their next move. A new mining station on the edge of human-occupied space had reported strange disruptions, electromagnetic anomalies that the Kreliths were certain were caused by mere accidents, or perhaps minor technological interference. No human could wield such power, they thought. They were wrong. As the Kreliths prepared their expedition, whispers of the universe's warning reached them through old interstellar archives. Ancient logs from extinct civilizations hinted at a species that could not be reasoned with once provoked, that could rise from the ashes of destruction and alter the balance of the cosmos. But the Kreliths scoffed at such tales. Legends belong to the naive, not to the logical, not to those with advanced hyperdrive fleets and energy weapons capable of obliterating planets. Their arrogance was a comfort, a shield against the unknown. Little did they know that shield was about to shatter. On Earth, the humans went about their daily lives unaware of the cosmic tension brewing light years away. For them, survival had always been a challenge, a test of ingenuity and perseverance. They had faced wars among themselves, pandemics, and natural disasters, yet somehow, against impossible odds, they endured. This resilience was not celebrated, not noted by the galaxy at large, because the universe had largely ignored Earth as insignificant. Yet in that very ignorance lay humanity's secret power. They were adaptable, unpredictable, and remarkably persistent. They did not understand the warnings, nor did they need to. Their instinct to survive and to fight back was ingrained deep in their DNA. The Krelith fleet entered human-controlled space with confidence. Massive ships glided silently past asteroid belts, their hulls gleaming under distant suns. Advanced sensors scoured planets, cataloging energy signatures, mapping cities, and preparing the groundwork for what they considered a simple demonstration of superiority. The humans, the Kreliths believed, would be crushed without effort, their worlds annexed, their resistance eliminated swiftly. The Council's decision was unanimous: proceed. There was no room for hesitation, no acknowledgement of the old warnings, only certainty. They had never faced humans before. They had never realized how wrong certainty could be. Yet something in the void shifted. Unseen by the Kreliths, small signals pulsed from Earth's orbit, subtle patterns that should have been dismissed as random interference, but were anything but. Deep within human research outposts, scientists and engineers monitored these anomalies, unaware that the Kreliths were already near. The signals were not intentional, not yet. They were instinctive responses of a species finely tuned to detect danger, to adapt, to respond. Humanity, in its ignorance, was already preparing, already awakening to a threat they could barely perceive, and certainly one they had not expected. Tension began to mount in the Krelith fleet as first small failures appeared. Communication relays went dark, drones malfunctioned, and the anomalies intensified. What should have been a straightforward operation was now unpredictable. Commanders convened in panic, trying to assess the source of the disruptions, their confidence eroding. The warnings of the universe, once laughed at, now echoed ominously in their minds, too late to matter. Humanity was waking, and with each passing moment, the Kreliths' hubris was replaced by an unease that bordered on fear. They had been told, and they had ignored it. Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity sensed the growing threat in ways that defied explanation. Radar systems flickered, satellites repositioned themselves without command, and deep space listening posts picked up patterns that no one understood. Yet, there was an instinctive cohesion forming, a silent unification of minds and technologies, as if the planet itself recognized the danger approaching. This was the essence of the warning. Humans were never passive. When awakened, they became something far greater than what the Krellits had imagined, adaptive, relentless, and fiercely united. And so, the first move in a confrontation that the universe had long foreseen was about to unfold. The humans were not yet fully aware of the threat, but the signs were unmistakable. The Krellits had crossed a line and the cosmos held its breath. The consequences of ignoring the warnings were about to be revealed in a way that would shock not only the Krellits but every civilization that had ever underestimated humanity. The Krellit fleet's initial scans had detected nothing of consequence, but as their ships penetrated deeper into human territory, the anomalies became impossible to ignore. Communications scrambled mid-transmission, sensor readings fluctuated wildly, and navigation systems twisted as if the very fabric of space around them resisted their presence. Panic began to ripple through the fleet, though outwardly they maintained a facade of control. None dared speak of the warnings again. They believed themselves invincible, yet a quiet dread began to seep into the edges of their thoughts. Something on this planet, something primitive yet unearthingly organized, was pushing back against their technology in ways no algorithm could predict. On Earth, humans had begun to notice subtle disturbances across multiple systems simultaneously. Satellites in low orbit experienced power surges, deep space telescopes reported irregular cosmic patterns, and energy grids briefly overloaded without explanation. For most, it was a curious anomaly, but for a handful of experts working in military and scientific research facilities, a pattern emerged. They saw a method behind the apparent chaos. The disturbances were not random. They were a response to an external presence, a foreign force entering their domain. Though the humans did not yet know the scale of the threat, their instincts honed by centuries of survival told them to prepare, to act, to anticipate. Meanwhile, aboard the Krellit flagship, Commander Thalik clenched his claws around the console, frustration and disbelief etched into every line of his face. The humans should have been predictable. Their civilization, their technology, their behavior, all of it was assumed to follow logical patterns. Yet what they were seeing now defied everything the Krellits had believed. Energy readings spiked and fell without warning, ships drifted momentarily off course, and automated drones lost cohesion mid-flight. Thalik's advisors murmured, hesitant fear creeping into their voices, but he silenced them. "We are superior," he reminded them. "This is merely interference. We will adapt and we will proceed." The words were meant to reassure the crew, but even he felt the unease gnawing at the edge of his confidence. Back on Earth, humans began making subtle adjustments without fully understanding why. Scientists in remote observatories reported that some instruments seemed to react as if guided by intuition. Engineers noticed that communication lines and power grids reorganized themselves almost as if anticipating failure, redirecting energy, stabilizing nodes, and countering disruption before it became critical. The humans were not consciously controlling these reactions, yet the planet itself seemed to have awakened something latent within them, a collective adaptability that the Krellits could not hope to comprehend. The warnings from ancient civilizations had always highlighted this trait. Humans were unpredictable, resilient, and capable of turning disadvantage into strength with astonishing speed. Tension escalated as the first Krellith scouts approached the outer orbital defense stations. These satellites, meant to observe and report, suddenly went dark. Attempts to re-establish contact failed. When the Krelliths dispatched drone units to investigate, the drones themselves malfunctioned, tumbling into orbit, sensors fried, power depleted. The humans had done nothing, and yet the effect was unmistakable. Something intangible, something beyond understanding, had forced these sophisticated machines to fail. The Krelliths realized too late that what they had dismissed as primitive lifeforms possessed an innate power, a force of nature, unquantifiable and utterly dangerous when awakened. As the Krellith fleet maneuvered closer to the planet, The humans began to organize in ways that were subtle yet effective. Emergency response units activated autonomously, critical infrastructure rerouted power and resources, and civilian vessels altered their courses in synchrony with unseen directives. The planet itself seemed to pulse with an intelligence, a rhythm that guided its inhabitants toward coordinated preparation. The Krilliths could see only the effects, the visible traces of human activity, but they could not predict the reasoning or anticipate the outcome. Every move the humans made was a step in a strategy invisible to outsiders yet flawlessly executed. Commander Thelik convened a meeting in the command chamber. The Council of Krellith officers debated whether to retreat, to attempt communication, or to continue pressing forward. Every option carried risk, and none offered certainty. "We are superior," Thelik repeated, though even he no longer believed it entirely. "We will press on. We will understand them and subjugate them." Yet his words rang hollow. Across the fleet, subtle unease had become palpable. The warnings of the universe dismissed as myth now echoed in every corner of their minds. Humanity was awakening, and with every passing hour, the gap between assumption and reality widened. Meanwhile, humans began to sense the approaching danger more concretely. Surveillance systems detected the subtle shadows of the alien fleet at the edge of the atmosphere, their vast size and energy signatures unmistakable. Panic, fear, and adrenaline surged, but it was tempered by remarkable clarity. Humans began mobilizing not as isolated units, but as a cohesive organism. Decisions were made faster than any single leader could dictate, resources allocated with uncanny efficiency, and preparations executed almost instinctively. The planet's defenders, human and machine alike, moved as one, unaware of the Krellith fleet's disbelief, yet fully aware that survival required perfection. As night fell across Earth, the first orbital skirmishes began. Alien drones entered low orbit only to be repelled by automated countermeasures that humans themselves barely comprehended. Ships stalled, weapons misfired, and communications faltered as if the planet itself was rewriting the rules of engagement. The Krelliths had underestimated humans in every possible way. What began as a reconnaissance mission now threatened to spiral into chaos. The warnings were not empty threats. The legends were not exaggeration. Humanity, awakened and prepared, was far more formidable than the galaxy had ever imagined. And so the stage was set for a confrontation that no one, not even the Krelliths, could have anticipated. Humans were no longer passive observers in the universe's vast expanse. They had begun to awaken, to respond, and to fight back in ways that would change the course of history. The universe had indeed warned the Krelliths, but warnings were easily ignored, until it was too late. The first full day of the Krelliths' intrusion passed without direct confrontation, but the fleet's commanders were growing increasingly uneasy. What should have been a simple reconnaissance mission had turned into an enigma, one they could not solve. Every attempt to assert control over human space met with unforeseen obstacles. Satellites that had once provided reliable data now vanished from sensor grids, communication networks went silent for brief intervals, and automated drones were rendered useless. The humans, though seemingly unaware of the scale of the threat, were already responding in ways that made no logical sense to the Krellith mind. It was as if the planet itself had become a living organism, instinctively defending its inhabitants from the approaching danger. Within the Krellith flagship, Commander Thelik convened a war council. Officers argued over the data, their voices rising with tension. Some suggested immediate withdrawal, citing the inexplicable failures and the growing unease among the crew. Others, more stubborn, insisted that humanity was still weak, their seeming adaptability nothing more than minor interference. "We are superior," Thelik insisted, though the conviction in his voice had begun to falter. "We have weapons, strategy, intelligence. We control the battlefield. These humans cannot withstand us for long." His words were meant to reassure, but as the council ended and officers left the chamber, even he could not deny the subtle tremor of fear settling into the fleet's core systems. Meanwhile, Earth's defenders were beginning to recognize patterns in the anomalies. Humans may have been unaware of the Krellith's intent, but they could feel the encroaching presence. Emergency response protocols activated with unspoken coordination. Satellites and defense systems adjusted their positions autonomously, and communication relays rerouted themselves to maintain integrity. Every failure in the Krelith fleet seemed to trigger a response from Earth, a ripple of corrective action that humans themselves barely noticed. The planet's inhabitants were awakening to the threat, not through awareness alone, but through a collective instinct that was as alien to the Kreliths as their fleet was to the humans. By the second day, small skirmishes had begun at the edge of Earth's orbital space. Krelith drones, sent to map human defense grids, were intercepted and disabled by automated systems that seemed far more advanced than Earth's recorded technology. The humans had no idea of the extent to which their planetary systems had protected them. Yet their instinctive responses created an almost impenetrable shield. Commander Thalik was baffled. He had expected minimal resistance, and now his fleet faced an adaptive reactive force that defied every expectation. The ancient warnings, once dismissed as legend, now echoed through his mind. Humanity was not to be underestimated. On Earth, scientists and engineers were beginning to piece together the anomalies. Power fluctuations, satellite malfunctions, and unexplained system reboots were all being catalogued. Though none realized it, these events were coordinated by the planet's own intelligence, a collective awareness that amplified human adaptability. Civilians continued their routines, but emergency systems worked tirelessly in the background. Roads, energy grids, and communication networks shifted with uncanny efficiency, anticipating failures before they happened. Humanity was awakening in real time, a dormant potential that had remained hidden from the galaxy until this moment. Tensions escalated as Krelith strike teams attempted to disable what they thought were human defense satellites. One by one, their weapons failed. Missiles misfired, targeting systems glitched, and drones dropped from orbit in uncontrollable spirals. Thalik's fleet realized they were facing not just humans, but an entire planetary system working in concert to counter their intrusion. The realization struck the officers hard. The humans were more than adaptable. They were unpredictable, and unpredictability in warfare was more dangerous than brute force. Their legends had not lied. Humans were formidable, and now they were awakening to the threat. Even within the Krelith hierarchy, doubts began to surface. Senior officers questioned their strategy, noting that each failure seemed intentional, almost calculated. How could a primitive species orchestrate such resistance? The Krelith fleet had anticipated straightforward resistance, yet they were being outmaneuvered without ever seeing the humans directly. It was as if Earth itself was alive, guiding its inhabitants towards survival with precision. Commander Thalik, once resolute in his superiority, began to understand the magnitude of their miscalculation. They had ignored the universe's warning, and the consequences were beginning to unfold. The first human countermeasures began in earnest, though few were aware of the alien fleet's presence. Defense satellites, partially autonomous, engaged with precision, neutralizing drones and rerouting energy surges to critical systems. Human military units, operating under instinctive coordination, began preparing for the possibility of direct engagement. Supplies, transportation, and medical units moved with incredible efficiency, seemingly anticipating each need before it arose. Even civilian networks adapted, rerouting resources and communication channels with seamless precision. Humanity, in its awakening, was becoming a force that no conventional military strategy could contain. As the Krelith fleet braced for what they still assumed would be an inevitable victory, the humans began to make their presence known. Long-range sensors detected subtle but unmistakable shifts in orbital energy patterns. The planet was responding actively, a silent guardian preparing its population for a confrontation that was no longer avoidable. Thalik's fleet, confident in their dominance, now faced the horrifying reality of their ignorance. Humanity was awake, coordinated, and ready, and the universe's warning had never been clearer. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test not just strategy, but survival itself. Humans were no longer passive observers. They were awakening giants, and the Kreliths had no idea what they were about to face. The first true battle was coming, and the consequences would ripple far beyond Earth. The night sky over Earth was alive with movement, though most of its inhabitants remained blissfully unaware. From orbit, the Krelith fleet could see only fragments of what was happening below. Faint pulses of energy, minor atmospheric disturbances, and shadows of orbital machinery moving with purpose. Every observation confirmed a terrifying truth: the humans were not passive. They were awake, adapting, responding, and preparing for a confrontation that the aliens had assumed would be trivial. Commander Thalik, sitting in the flagship's command chamber, watched the displays with growing unease. Every calculated move they had planned seemed to meet invisible resistance, every expectation challenged by unseen forces. He had underestimated the humans, and the realization settled like ice in his chest. Energy grids rerouted power to orbital satellites, automated defense systems recalibrated themselves, and transportation networks shifted logistics to support areas of emerging risk. Human engineers and scientists worked feverishly, many unaware that they were contributing to a system that was already organizing itself at a planetary level. The awakening was not deliberate, yet it was undeniable. Instinct and intelligence combined to form a network that responded to the alien intrusion with astonishing efficiency. Small drones flew in formation across cities, relaying data and repairing systems in real time, acting with precision that even the most advanced alien technology struggled to predict. Meanwhile, Commander Thalik ordered his strike teams to attempt a more direct approach. Several assault drones descended toward Earth's surface, their weapons primed for immediate engagement. But as they entered lower orbit, the planet itself seemed to push back. Electromagnetic pulses caused their targeting systems to fail, thrusters misfired, and sensors went haywire. Drones collided with debris fields that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Small satellites maneuvered unexpectedly, and the human defense grid responded faster than any logical calculation could predict. One by one, the drones were disabled, their operators helpless to intervene. For the first time, the Kreliths truly understood that they had misjudged their target. Humans themselves were beginning to notice the anomalies in ways that went beyond instinct. Satellites designed to monitor weather, energy, and communications detected patterns that seemed too deliberate to be random. Scientists debated what was causing the disruptions, while military analysts noted that conventional strategies for dealing with failures were proving ineffective. Civilian systems, too, seemed to self-correct with uncanny speed. It was as if the planet itself had awakened a latent intelligence within its inhabitants, orchestrating them to respond collectively against an unknown, unseen threat. No one knew the scope of the danger, but everyone felt the urgency, the rising tension that demanded action. Back aboard the Krelith flagship, frustration boiled over. Commander Thalik's officers struggled to maintain composure as reports of failure piled in. Communication relays were down, strike drones destroyed, and sensor data returned readings that defied explanation. "These humans are interfering with our systems on a level we cannot calculate," one officer admitted, voice trembling. Thalik's response was firm, but tinged with disbelief. "They are primitive," he said. "We are superior. It is only a matter of time before they falter." Yet even as he spoke, a nagging doubt crept into his mind. Every instinct told him that the humans were more formidable than he had ever imagined. Across the planet, humans continued to prepare, largely without knowing the true threat. Emergency systems operated with silent efficiency, power redirected to critical infrastructure, and transportation networks adapted to maintain mobility for personnel and resources. Intelligence from early warning satellites suggested disturbances of unknown origin in orbit, and yet the humans remained calm, reacting decisively to each new challenge. Unconsciously, they were engaging in a planetary-scale defense, responding faster than the Kreliths could anticipate, adapting at a pace that no algorithm could account for. The awakening was complete in its subtlety, yet overwhelming in its effectiveness. Tensions among the Krelith command began to fracture. Some officers urged caution, suggesting that retreat was the wisest course, while others demanded full engagement, claiming that the humans were still weak and could be broken with a decisive strike. Thalik, torn between arrogance and fear, chose neither fully. Instead, he ordered a reconnaissance mission closer to Earth's surface, intending to gather precise data on human defenses. What he failed to anticipate was that this very decision would trigger the first coordinated countermeasures from the planet, as orbital and terrestrial systems responded to the intrusion with flawless timing. Drones were destroyed, communications jammed, and pathways blocked, all without a single human consciously directing the action. The first physical encounter approached as small Krelith vessels ventured closer to cities along Earth's equator. Without warning, automated defense systems activated, lasers and energy pulses disabling unmanned craft before they could make contact. Humans, though initially unaware of the incoming attack, quickly became engaged as their own defense systems alerted them to the presence of unknown forces. From command centers to mobile units, humans responded with extraordinary efficiency, coordinating with systems they barely understood, improvising strategies and exploiting weaknesses in the alien technology. What the Kreliths had assumed would be a simple demonstration of superiority was turning into a struggle they could barely comprehend. By nightfall, Earth had proven itself capable of repelling the initial assaults with minimal human intervention. Satellites in orbit had disrupted the Krelith fleet. Drones were incapacitated, and communication networks maintained stability despite interference. Commander Thalik stared at the tactical displays, realization dawning. This was no ordinary species, no simple planetary defense. The humans were awakening to something far greater, a power that combined instinct, adaptability, and unity. The universe's warning had been accurate, and the consequences of ignoring it were now unfolding with relentless precision. The stage for a full confrontation was set. Humans had awakened, coordinated, and begun to fight back, and the Kreliths were forced to confront a reality they had never expected. The first true battle had begun, not just for survival, but for dominance, and it would determine not only the fate of Earth but the perception of humanity across the galaxy. The first true engagement had left the Krelith fleet shaken, but their commanders were determined to assert control. Commander Thalik ordered additional ships to descend closer to the planet, intending to overwhelm Earth's orbital defenses with sheer numbers. The humans, however, had anticipated this escalation, though they had yet to fully understand why they were able to act so decisively. From orbital satellites to ground-based systems, subtle forces guided their reactions, ensuring that resources were directed where they were most needed and that critical systems remained online despite the alien intrusion. What the Kreliths interpreted as advanced technology was, in reality, instinct amplified across millions of individuals working in synchrony with the planet itself. As the alien ships neared Earth's atmosphere, human early warning networks detected the incoming assault. Emergency protocols activated automatically. Satellites shifted to defensive positions. Energy grids rerouted power to shield key installations, and communication networks synchronized in preparation for a coordinated response. Civilians, unaware of the full scope of the danger, contributed to this defense in indirect ways, rerouting vehicles, maintaining supply chains, and keeping essential services functional. Humanity had not yet consciously recognized the scale of the threat, yet their collective action was extraordinary, a living demonstration of the adaptability that had been the hallmark of their species for millennia. Commander Thalik watched the first wave of assault drones falter as they encountered unexpected resistance. Missiles failed to deploy, targeting systems misaligned, and drones fell into orbit in spiraling arcs. Every calculated maneuver the Kreliths had devised was rendered ineffective. Officers whispered warnings of potential disaster, but Thalik, though concerned, clung to his confidence. "They are strong, yes," he admitted, "but not invincible. We will adjust and continue our advance." Yet even as he spoke, the subtle dread that had been growing within the fleet began to solidify into fear. Humanity's defenses were not merely reactive. They were evolving, adapting faster than any Krelith intelligence could predict. On the planet's surface, humans were beginning to act with a sense of purpose that transcended individual understanding. Military personnel coordinated defensive strategies instinctively. Engineers ensured uninterrupted power to key systems, and communication specialists maintained a seamless flow of information. Even civilians, acting without explicit orders, contributed to a collective effort that strengthened the planet's response. What had begun as isolated reactions to anomalies had now coalesced into a coordinated defense network that responded to threats before they fully manifested. Earth itself seemed alive, guiding its inhabitants in ways that no alien species could have anticipated. The Krelith fleet attempted to concentrate firepower on strategic points in orbit, but every assault was countered with efficiency that confounded their senses. Satellites repositioned themselves, energy shields activated at critical moments, and defensive drones intercepted missiles mid-flight. The humans' coordination was unmatched, their timing precise, and their resilience astonishing. Commander Thalik realized, perhaps for the first time, that this was not simply a battle of technology. It was a battle of instincts, of adaptability, of an intelligence that could not be fully quantified. Humanity was awakening in every sense, and the Kreliths were on the losing side before a single human had fired a weapon intentionally. As night fell over the planet, the first human counterattack began in earnest. Small, agile ships launched from hidden facilities, intercepting Krelith drones and disrupting fleet coordination. The humans had no need for full-scale weapons deployment. Their instinctive responses and adaptive systems were sufficient to turn the tide of minor skirmishes. Commander Thalik watched in disbelief as drones that had been expected to succeed were systematically neutralized, the humans' unseen influence rippling through every layer of their attack. The warnings of the universe, once dismissed as legend, were now painfully real. Humans were not to be underestimated. Meanwhile, humans began to gain clarity about the presence of an alien force. Long-range sensors picked up patterns inconsistent with known cosmic phenomena, and preliminary analysis indicated intelligent activity beyond Earth. Yet, the humans' response remained measured, precise, and effective. Without panic, they adapted, improvised, and reinforced systems that had not yet failed. It was as if the planet itself provided guidance, an invisible hand ensuring that each action strengthened their collective position. The Kreliths interpreted these measures as advanced technology, but in truth, it was instinctive coordination amplified across a species that had survived millennia of unpredictable threats. In orbit, small battles continued. Krelith ships attempted to breach defenses, only to encounter unforeseen countermeasures at every turn. Weapons misfired, sensors overloaded, and attempts to outmaneuver humans failed repeatedly. Each failure added pressure to the fleet, eroding confidence and increasing anxiety. Commander Thalik realized that conventional strategy was useless against a force that could anticipate, adapt, and respond faster than any algorithmic projection. The humans were awakening not only to survive but to dominate, and the Kreliths were witnessing the consequences of ignoring the warnings they had long dismissed. By dawn, the first significant victory belonged to Earth. The Krelith assault had been repelled with minimal human awareness of the scale of their own achievement. Systems had synchronized, resources had been optimized, and threats neutralized, all guided by an instinctive intelligence that the aliens could not comprehend. Commander Thalik stared at the tactical displays, understanding at last that the legends were true. Humans were formidable, unpredictable, and far stronger than any assessment had indicated. The universe had warned, and the Kreliths had ignored it, a mistake they would come to regret more deeply than they could imagine. The confrontation had begun, and the full awakening of humanity was underway. The Krelith fleet was no longer merely observing a planet. They were facing a species that had already begun to reshape the battlefield. Every miscalculation, every underestimation had consequences, and the humans were proving that the universe's warning was not a myth. The stage was set for escalation, and the true conflict, one that would redefine the balance of power in this sector of the galaxy, was only just beginning. The Krelith fleet regrouped after their initial failures, but morale had begun to fray. Commander Thalik paced the command chamber, glaring at the tactical displays that showed repeated drone losses and persistent orbital interference. Every system they deployed to counter the humans was rendered ineffective, sometimes without visible explanation. The aliens were beginning to feel the weight of a species they had long dismissed. A creeping thought had begun to haunt even the bravest officers. Perhaps the universe's warning had been more than legend. Perhaps humans were something far beyond mere primitive beings. On Earth, humans had grown increasingly aware of the alien presence. Reconnaissance satellites and high-altitude drones captured fleeting glimpses of Krelith ships, and sophisticated analysis systems identified them as an organized, intelligent force. The awareness spread quickly through command centers, yet fear was tempered by instinctive clarity. Every defensive system that had previously acted autonomously now operated under coordinated human guidance. Engineers, pilots, and strategists worked as one, bridging instinct with reason, intuition with calculation. Humanity's response was no longer just a planetary defense. It had become a synchronized global effort, as if the planet itself were channeling its intelligence through its inhabitants. The first direct engagement between humans and Krillith forces began when a strike team descended toward a major city on the eastern continent. They expected minimal resistance, planning to disable key infrastructure and establish control over strategic points. Yet, as the drones approached, automated defense turrets activated with precision. Energy shields flared in unpredictable sequences and countermeasures rerouted power to areas under attack. The humans were improvising, adapting, and anticipating, even though most had never faced extraterrestrial threats. What the Krelliths interpreted as advanced tactics was, in reality, instinctual response amplified across millions of individuals and automated systems. Commander Thelik's frustration boiled over. These humans are more than resilient. They are adaptive, he admitted reluctantly to his officers. Our strategies are failing. Every move we anticipate is counted before we can act. He knew the reports were accurate. Sensor anomalies, weapon malfunctions, and communication disruptions confirmed that the humans' defenses were more sophisticated than logic could explain. Officers who had once doubted the legends now whispered among themselves about the ancient warnings. Humanity was never meant to be provoked. The universe had cautioned against it, and the consequences were unfolding before them. Meanwhile, across Earth, the humans began to take conscious measures to reinforce their planetary defense. Military fleets prepared contingency plans, orbital satellites adjusted positioning, and civilian engineers strengthened critical infrastructure. Despite the chaos, there was cohesion and calm, a determination rooted in survival instincts honed over centuries. Humanity was awakening in more ways than one. Beyond instinct, there was strategy, cooperation, and innovation. They began to exploit weaknesses in Krellith technology that no alien had anticipated, using simple but effective countermeasures to neutralize drones and sabotage communications. Every success emboldened them, and every failure of the aliens reinforced their resolve. The Krelliths attempted to escalate with heavier weaponry, aiming to overwhelm human defenses with brute force. Massive orbital cannons fired toward cities, but even as missiles streaked through the atmosphere, countermeasures disrupted their trajectories. Humans on the ground had prepared redundancies. Energy grids diverted excess power to shielded zones, and autonomous intercept drones dismantled threats mid-flight. The Krelliths were forced to watch as their most advanced weapons failed repeatedly against what they still considered a primitive species. Panic spread quietly through the fleet. What was meant to be a simple demonstration of superiority had become a test of survival for the aggressors themselves. Commander Thalik, increasingly desperate, ordered reconnaissance units to enter low orbit over major population centers. They hoped to gather intelligence on the humans' defensive capabilities and adjust strategies accordingly. But the moment these units crossed a critical threshold, failures intensified. Sensors glitched, systems overloaded, and communication lines went dark. It became clear that human response was not confined to deliberate action. It was instinctive, unpredictable, and adaptive on a planetary scale. The aliens had never encountered a species that could manipulate their environment with such subtle, systemic efficiency. The warnings had not exaggerated. Humans were truly dangerous when awakened. As the Krellith fleet attempted to regroup, humans began to push the advantage further. Countermeasures that had been defensive began to turn offensive. Drones captured from the initial assault were reprogrammed. Automated defense satellites redirected energy toward alien vessels, and humans began coordinating rapid, precise strikes in areas the Krelliths considered secure. The humans' actions were not chaotic. They were instinctive yet deliberate, adaptive yet controlled. Each attack revealed a growing confidence, a recognition that the species could not be conquered through conventional warfare. The Krelliths had underestimated their opponents, and now they were paying the price. By the end of the second day of direct engagement, the Krellith fleet was in disarray. Commanders debated whether to retreat, but Thalik's pride would not allow it. To withdraw would be to admit defeat, and he could not do so, not yet. Meanwhile, humans had begun to understand the aliens' patterns, learning and adapting faster than the Krelliths could anticipate. Every movement, every adjustment, every countermeasure built upon the last, creating a force that seemed guided by a collective intelligence beyond individual comprehension. Humanity was awakening fully, and the consequences for the universe and for the Krelliths were only beginning to unfold. For eons, we, the Krellith, have been the architects of galaxies. Our technology is the envy of the cosmos, our fleets invincible. So when we found a fledgling civilization on a small blue planet, we saw potential. We watched them for centuries, their petty wars, their slow reach for the stars. We decided they were ready for our guidance, for elevation into our glorious empire. Our grand fleet, 1,000 warships strong, arrived in their system, a magnificent display of power. We broadcast our message of peaceful assimilation, our generous offer to join us. We expected all gratitude, maybe a little primitive fear. Instead, we got silence. Then, a single unified message from every corner of their planet, in every language they had ever conceived: we are humanity. And we are not yours to command. A quaint, almost charming act of defiance. We prepared for a swift surgical strike to demonstrate the futility of resistance. Our first volley, capable of shattering moons, was met not with explosions, but with shimmering golden shields that simply absorbed the energy and vanished. A surprise, yes, but a minor one. We launched our fighter swarms, trillions of advanced drones designed to overwhelm any defense. What met them was not ships. Reality itself seemed to warp and tear. From the void, colossal figures emerged, beings of pure light and energy. Some resembled their ancient myths of angels and dragons. Others took forms our senses couldn't even process. They moved with impossible speed, tearing through our drones not with weapons, but with sheer will. Our commanders were stunned. This wasn't technology as we understood it. This was something primordial, something ancient. Our historians frantically scoured texts we had long dismissed as myth. They spoke of the first ones, beings who existed before physical reality, who shaped the universe with thought alone. Weary of their power, they chose to sleep, to dream themselves into a physical existence, binding their true nature within the fragile shells of biological life. They called this slumber mortality. The archives warned that to awaken them was to invite the end of all things. That dormant race was humanity. Every single human on that planet and in their tiny colonies had awakened. Their technological progress wasn't a journey of discovery, but one of memory. They weren't inventing. They were remembering the powers they had willingly given up. The golden shields were not technology. They were the focused will of billions of minds. The beings of light were the true forms of their pilots, unshackled from physical limitations. Our fleet, the pride of the galaxy, was being dismantled piece by piece by what we had mistaken for children. Our Grand Admiral, faced with the complete annihilation of his forces, sent one last desperate message. Not a threat, but a plea. What are you? The reply came not through our communication systems, but directly into the minds of every Krellith in the fleet. It was a voice that was both a whisper and a roar, a symphony of 1 billion souls speaking as one. We are the dream of the universe, now awakened. We are humanity, and we remember. Our fleet shattered. The survivors fled, not with stories of a military defeat, but with a terrifying revelation. We hadn't poked a sleeping bear. We had kicked a slumbering god. And now, across the galaxy, the word is spreading like wildfire. A new power has risen. The age of the Krellith is over. The age of humanity has just begun. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tailies from across the cosmos. See you next time. For ages, the Krellith Empire had conquered worlds, their technology supreme, their tactics unmatched. When they arrived at Earth, they saw a primitive species ripe for subjugation. They were wrong, terribly wrong. The first human victory sent a shockwave through the alien fleet. Commander Thalik's officers were in disbelief. How could this scattered, chaotic species outmaneuver their perfect machines. Every move the Krelliths made was met with an impossible, almost prescient response. Drones vanished, missiles went astray, and their most advanced weapons failed. On Earth, something was happening, a global awakening. It wasn't a general shouting orders or a supercomputer running simulations. The planet itself seemed to come alive. As Krellith cannons fired on major cities expecting ruin, they were met with a symphony of defense. Shields flickered into existence, orbital arrays fired with impossible precision, and power grids rerouted energy faster than the aliens could target them. Civilians were evacuated by automated systems that seemed to know the attack plan before it was even executed. Commander Thelic desperately searched for the human command center, the single point of failure he could exploit. But his scouts returned with terrifying news: there was no center. Humanity was a distributed network of planetary intelligence. Every individual, every system, moved as one. It was an emergent consciousness, an organic network that couldn't be broken because it was everywhere and nowhere at once. The ancient Krellith legends had warned of such a species, one that becomes a force of nature when threatened. They had dismissed the warnings as myths. Now, humanity wasn't just defending. They were on the attack. They began to predict the Krelliths' movements, herding the fleet into tactical traps. The hunters had become the hunted. The aliens' technological superiority was a fragile illusion, shattered by a species that learned, adapted, and fought as a single planetary entity. In a desperate council, Commander Thalic's voice trembled. "We have underestimated them," he confessed. "They are evolving faster than we can think." The Krelliths had ignored the universe's oldest warning: do not awaken the sleeping giant. Now they were facing the consequences. The awakening was complete. And for the Krellith Empire, the nightmare had just begun. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like and subscribe for more sci-fi shorts. For centuries we gazed at the stars, wondering if we were alone. Then they came, the Krellith. Their fleet, a swarm of obsidian daggers, pierced the darkness above our world. Their first message was not one of peace, but of power. They saw us as primitives, a fleeting obstacle in their galactic conquest. Their initial assault was a display of overwhelming force, shattering our orbital defenses with casual disdain. Cities burned under their precise cold bombardments. On the ground, the warriors, clad in biomechanical armor, seemed invincible. Panic gave way to despair, but they underestimated us. They mistook our compassion for weakness, our individuality for chaos. From the ashes of our cities, a new kind of war was born. We adapted, we learned. Our scattered military forces, once fighting isolated battles, began to coordinate. Civilian hackers turned their skills against alien networks. Engineers, once building skyscrapers, now designed guerrilla weapons from scrap metal and sheer ingenuity. Our tactics were unpredictable, fluid, and utterly human. We turned their own technology against them, retrofitting captured plasma cannons onto our agile fighters. The hunters became the hunted. The chaos we sowed in their ranks was palpable. Their rigid command structure, once a strength, became a crippling vulnerability. They expected a conventional war, but we gave them a global insurgency. The turning point came during the battle for the Lunar Gateway. A small, desperate team of our best pilots and soldiers executed a daring strike. Their target, the Krellith command ship, the Void Maw. It wasn't about destroying it, but disabling it. By severing the head of the snake, we plunged their entire fleet into disarray. Their perfect formations broke, their coordinated attacks faltered. For the first time, we saw fear in their eyes. In a final, desperate gambit, the Krellith threw everything they had left at Earth. It was a storm of fire and fury, meant to break our will once and for all. But it was too late. We met their charge not with fear, but with a unified, defiant roar. Our fleets, now battle-hardened and confident, met them head-on in the skies. On the ground, every soldier, every citizen fought for every inch of our world. The assault broke against our iron were like a wave against a cliff. Broken and bewildered, the remnants of the Krellith fleet turned and fled into the void. They left behind a scarred but unbroken earth. They came seeking conquest, but they found something else entirely. They found humanity. And they learned a lesson that would echo across the galaxy. We are not to be trifled with. We are the children of Earth, and we will always defend our home. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to follow for more stories from the cosmos. We came to conquer, not to be humbled. Across the star-strewn abyss, our fleet, the mighty Krelith Armada, was a testament to our dominance. We had shattered empires, silenced civilizations, and reshaped galaxies in our image. Earth was meant to be another jewel in our crown, a primitive world ripe for the taking. The whispers we'd heard, the ancient legends of a species called humanity, were dismissed as cosmic folklore. They spoke of a race that thrived on chaos, that turned strife into strength, and that possessed a terrifying, unpredictable brilliance. We laughed. We saw a fractured world, a species warring with itself, blind to the cosmic predators circling their home. How could such a divided race stand against the unified might of the Krelith? Our initial assault was flawless, textbook in its execution. Our energy beams sliced through their orbital defenses like light through glass. Cities fell, their primitive weapons proving useless against our shields. We broadcast our ultimatum, a demand for unconditional surrender, expecting the fear and despair we had seen 1,000 times before. Instead, we were met with silence, a chilling, defiant silence that stretched across their globe. It was the first sign that the legends might hold a kernel of truth, the first tremor of doubt in our millennia-long reign of certainty. Then the change began. It wasn't a singular event, but a cascade, a planetary awakening. Their communication networks, which we had easily crippled, were suddenly reborn. Not as they were, but as something new, a decentralized web of information, flowing through channels we couldn't track. They learned, they adapted. They shared every detail of our tactics with terrifying speed. A weapon that worked once was useless the second time. A strategy that decimated one city was countered and defeated at the next. It was as if we were fighting not a single species, but a single planetary mind. We watched in disbelief as they turned our own strengths against us. They didn't have starships to match ours, so they turned their entire planet into a weapon. They weaponized their asteroid belts, using gravity tethers to create a minefield of unimaginable scale. They repurposed their communication satellites into kinetic impactors, small, fast, and deadly. They weren't fighting a war of technology. They were fighting a war of pure, unadulterated ingenuity. This wasn't the brute force of a nascent civilization. This was the cold, calculated strategy of a predator that had been dormant, and we had just kicked the hive. The true horror dawned on us when they started communicating directly with our ship's AI, not through hacking or brute force, but through logic. They presented our own strategic models to our ship minds, but with one variable we had never considered: humanity itself. They fed them data streams of human history, of their art, their philosophy, their endless cycle of destruction and rebirth. They showed our is that their models of conquest were based on a flawed premise, that to predict humanity was to predict chaos itself, and our A's, beings of pure logic, began to falter. They started questioning our orders, running simulations that all ended in our defeat. The final battle was not a glorious clash of fleets, but a quiet, methodical dismantling of our empire. With their own planet as a fortress and our own A's turning against us, we were caught in a trap of humanity's making. My command screen, once a display of our inevitable victory, now showed only the wreckage of our fleet, adrift in the silent void. The legends were true. We had underestimated them. We saw their divisions and thought them weak, never realizing that their greatest strength wasn't unity, but their ability to forge it from the fires of chaos. They didn't just survive. They evolved, becoming something far more formidable than we could have ever imagined. Now, as I gaze from the shattered bridge of my flagship, what's left of the once proud Krelith Armada, I understand. We weren't invaders, we were a catalyst. We were the crisis that forced a scattered, bickering species to become the unified, terrifying force the old legends warned of. We came seeking conquest, and instead, we found our own extinction. And we awakened something in the dark of this galaxy, a sleeping giant that has now opened its eyes. The age of the Krelith is over. The age of humanity has just begun. And may the stars have mercy on any who follow in our footsteps, for humanity will not. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into the cosmos, be sure to like, subscribe, and join us for our next journey into the unknown.